Hello, I'm Dr. Patricia McGuire. I am a board-certified developmental and behavioral pediatrician. Today I'm going to be talking about autism. There are some new numbers out. 1 in every 88 child is in the autism spectrum. 1 in every 88. That's a very large percentage of our kids. That's more common than Down syndrome. Now, what does that mean to us? Well, economically it means a lot. It now costs us over $126 billion a year to care for individuals in the spectrum. And we're not doing that good of a job yet. Now, a big part of the problem is the children that have intellectual disabilities. And Figure 1 is going to show you how that looks. And what you're going to notice is varies state from state, but overall 45% of individuals in the autism spectrum have an IQ equal or lower to 70%. Those are kids that will become adults that will need a lot more supervision, a lot more sheltered workshops, group homes, and we have to realize they're there and we have to help them. So a lot of people have a question, how did we get these numbers? Well, the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta has a network of 14 sites around the country, and they make up what's called the Autism and Developmental Disabilities Monitoring Network. And every 2 years, they look at all of the data they have from evaluating reports of children ages 0 to 8 in their communities to come up with these prevalence numbers. And the numbers have been increasing as we become more aware of what the spectrum of autism looks like. Now, the numbers vary even in this group of 14 because some of our records are only healthcare records and some are healthcare and educational records. And as Figure 1 from the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report of the CDC shows, the states that had only healthcare reports had lower numbers than the ones that had health and educational reports. And part of that is also because in some states the educational system can make their own diagnostic determination to serve a child under the autism spectrum if they feel the child educationally meets the criteria. And that's an important distinction also, because if we wait for the healthcare providers, we're not doing as well as we should, even though the CDC has told us how many are out there. And in fact, in slide 25, you will see a graph of how each state is doing in the nation from the year 2008-2009, when they looked at all of their 8-year-olds and said which ones are being served under the autism label. And it ranged from 1 out of every 67 in Minnesota to 1 out of every 781 in Iowa. Now they had Vermont listed below Iowa, but actually the numbers, when you go back and look, is Vermont did a little better than Iowa, but definitely they were taking up the bottom. Now, since those numbers have come out, a lot of the states have they've become improved in how they identify and serve, so some of the numbers are getting better. Like for Iowa, they're now at 1 in every 150 are being served in the schools under the autism label, which is still less than the CDC number of 1 in every 88. So we still have room for improvement. It's important to diagnose autism early, but unfortunately our numbers haven't changed for the age of diagnosis for the last couple of decades. In fact, as Table 3 shows from the MMWR, the diagnosis for classic autism
is at 48 months. The diagnosis for PDD-NOS is at 53 months on average, and the diagnosis for Asperger syndrome is at 75 months.
The American Academy of Pediatrics feels that we need to find these kids and start services as soon as possible, and they strongly recommend that the MCHAT, which is a screener, be used at the well child visits between 18 and 30 months. And that was initiated in 2007. So our numbers are still showing that we're not quite there if the average is still 4 years instead of 18 to 30 months. Now this is all important to look at because the new DSM is coming out in 2013, and they're going to be modifying the criteria in several ways. First, everything is going to be autism spectrum. There's no longer going to be autism, PDD-NOS, and Asperger's, but it's going to be everyone is somewhere on the spectrum as far as severity of symptoms. And the criteria are a little more combined. Like one major area that has to be met are impairments in social and emotional reciprocity and social communication. And that includes verbal skills, eye contact, and even being able to maintain a conversation or a friendship. The other area that's going to be very important is restrictive, repetitive patterns of interests, and even sensory issues, which was not part of the DSM-4. They do say that the symptoms have to be present beginning in early childhood, although they may not be fully manifest until the academic and social demands exceed their capabilities. And for the diagnosis, you also have to show indeed there's impairment. Now there are 3 severity levels of impairment, so the milder levels may be things like more counseling time for parents and teachers, more social skills groups, maybe some language, but they may not need more intense therapy, whereas the level 2 and level 3 may require paraprofessionals, which are associates. They may require more group therapy, maybe even some residential placement, depending upon the setting. But we have a long ways to go yet, and we need to really reach out and find these kids early because the cost is so high and we don't.